Welcome back to another episode of Beekeeping Buddies. I'm Steven.
And I'm Luke.
Once again, it's time to talk about what we're doing in the beekeeping yard.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. This is one of my favorite times of year.
It is starting to get pretty busy around the bee yard.
Yeah. And it's exhausting. We did something this last weekend that it took me a whole day basically to recover from.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was lucky that it was Sunday that was rainy with nothing else planned.
Yeah.
So we, in the past 2 weeks, one of the major things we did is we completed picking up and acquiring our Nucs that we had pre-sold at the beginning, that we started pre-sales on at the beginning of the year. We didn't quite wind up with as many pre-sales as we were hoping, but for a first time business venture, I don't think we did too bad.
No.
There was certainly a lot of logistics that I think we understood we were going to have, but yet the actual implementation is always seems to be a challenge no matter how much you think you're prepared for it.
Right. So for those that don't know that are listening, so a nuke is 5 frames, a 5-frame colony, right? A normal colony is about 10 frames. And then a nuke is a 5-frame colony. It's one of the ways you can buy bees. And the packages are like 3 pounds of bees. So a nuke's basically, I would say 3 pounds of bees that are active, and then at least 3 pounds of bees that are unhatched. In the colonies that we got, I would say it's 3 pounds of bees that were active and probably 3 frames of bees that were unhatched, which is like 9 pounds of bees.
I think the 2 that I wound up with were probably, I know one was 4 frames that I would have called 75% full of cat brood.
Sure.
And then the other one was like all 5 frames had like 60% cat brood. Like it was a lot.
It was, they were all ready to go. There was one that I kept that I think is a little bit behind, whether they had to replace the queen or whatever. And then there was 2 that were queenless.
But I mean, in terms of stories of nukes that we've heard people picking up, like you're going to buy a $200 nuke, and then you get like 1.5 frames of brood and barely a frame of feed, like pollen and nectar, and then a couple of extra empty frames, and there's your 5-frame nuke. Like that is clear. That has certainly been, like, we know people who had picked that up as what they bought.
Yeah,
for
the same price, which is $200. We sold them for $200.
Yeah,
and
these were
excellent.
Not opposite that, right? Like they were so far from that. So
I was worried about swarming, actually. So like anytime that you have a nuke that I'm selling you, that I'm worried that, hey, it's got to go into a bigger box that they're going to swarm. That should be a good feeling.
The couple of people that I know we talked to were like, listen, these are really full. You should really be not, like, at the first opportunity you have, take these home and move them to 10 frames immediately, because this stuff is going to hatch in the next week, and it's just going to explode for the number of population you have.
Yeah, the state inspector actually said these are the best nukes that he's seen, that he's inspected this year. And he said he's gone through quite a few, so he was really happy.
So we and that that trip, there was a lot of driving. We covered quite a few states to pick those up. Had some road stops in between. We stopped and got some ice cream. We stopped at a Buc-ee's.
Yeah, Grater's ice cream. It's still my favorite ice cream in the world.
Honestly, guys, it was. I mean, like, if you've got Culver's, and you have some Culver's custard, it's
the raspberry chocolate chip. That's the best. The best thing that you can eat.
So along the way, we got coming back. We had a trailer of 50 Nucs. This was a utility trailer. At the front, they were stacked 4 high and tapered off toward the rear. And they were Pro Nucs, multicolored Pro Nucs. So they kind of stood out behind the SUV. It was just a standard white SUV, not a pickup truck. And We got quite a few looks and honks and, thumbs up. And
yeah, so the guy, I was surprised, a guy at Buc-ee's, because we stopped for gas, and man, that place was packed.
yeah.
And so rather than fight parking, we just left it parked at the pump.
Well, we pulled in behind another truck pulling a U-Haul trailer.
Yeah. And he had to go inside to go to the bathroom.
And we were like, hey, are you gonna pull out? Because he got done filling before we did. We're like, hey, are you gonna pull out? It would keep me from having to back up with this like busy parking lot and everything. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna go inside and get some stuff, so I'm gonna be a minute. And we're like, oh, well, if you're doing that, we're doing that.
Yeah. And by the time we came back, there was a guy poking around the.
Well,
Nucs.
there was not just one or two flying around.
There
was. I don't want to say that it was a cloud, but
there's a few, 100, 150.
It was a visible activity.
There's visible activity, and I was surprised that he was very brave. The guy walked right up to him and was poking around to see what they were, and he's like, "Oh yeah, they're honeybees."
Yeah.
So we got some looks. Not too much. No one actually physically stopped us to talk to us about it in the Buc-ee's, but it was
the person who passed us and honked and gave us a thumbs up. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was
clear.
Cool.
Like, you have to know what you're looking at, when you pass to do like to recognize that. So,
yeah. And those bees, I mean, we weren't driving slow. We were getting up to
and we were doing speed limit,
or 5 over, and. It's interesting when you stop. There's still ones that are hanging on the outside.
Yeah,
no idea how they're hanging on the outside. But
I don't know if it's the low pressure behind the car just keeps everything sucked in there or what. I don't know.
But they hang on to like the outside of the hives. Really, really interesting. They weren't overheating. So for those beekeepers that are out there that are like, oh my gosh, did you have the spacing right and all that stuff?
Yeah, we didn't have them packed too tight. The bottom rows that were down in the trailer is a 5-foot trailer, and we put 4 down there. Yeah. So there was a good 4 to 6 inch gap between some. Like, you could easily reach in between the nukes. Yeah. And I did that, and I didn't notice any kind of upper temperatures.
No die off, right?
Nope.
No noticeable dead bees in the hive.
Nope.
Nobody pulling out a bunch of dead bees. I had a few die that were hanging out on the entrance, and the temperatures dropped overnight to the 30s, and they, like a handful, I would say, is of bees we lost. But otherwise, I thought that was a really interesting, good experience. Again, not one of the things I would say, hey, everybody should do this. But for us, I thought it was
logistically, right? There's so much more involved that we're not getting into that you can understand why trying to be even a small scale supplier for a club turns into be a logistical nightmare, because just trying to do ones and twosies, if you're a club and just trying to put together enough orders for the club members, even at 200, right, that's still we did 50, which means they weren't that hard to haul, right? Like, we didn't have that much involved in trying to put together a haul rig, but it's just...
Well, the other interesting part of logistics that I didn't consider until after the fact was our local inspector wanted to inspect them. He wanted to come out and look at all of them. We went through 15 of them until he said, "Okay, we're good. We don't need to look at any more of these. They're all good." And
did he start at one end and just start popping lids, or did he just randomly pick one?
We started at one end and popped lids all the way down and went through, looked for queens, looked for brood patterns, all of those things that you normally do as just a normal inspection. I actually helped because I said, hey, you can do this by yourself. I understand. Would you like me to help? Because I'm happy to go through and point out anything that I think looks weird, which I did at one. One of them, I said, hey, this is a little bit of a spotty pattern. And his response was, yeah, but there's a apigard strip right there, and you're going to get that around that strip. Apigard's a miticide.
Yeah, I saw strips on several.
So that was so the issue wasn't that he came out to inspect. The issue was that I had to coordinate with him after the bees got here and then coordinate a pickup date with everybody else.
Yeah.
And as you'd expect, not everybody's free every day.
Well, yeah, because the way it went was we were coming home on a Saturday evening. Sunday evening? No, Sunday evening, because the other person had driven on a Saturday. And so then but they didn't want to inspect the next day. So there goes Monday. So then it's Tuesday for pickup. So it's the middle of the week, and then people are working and
then he changed it from Tuesday because the weather was going to be bad back to Monday.
Oh, that's what it was.
And then the guy that was supposed to meet us, he pushed his day back because he was going to leave on Friday and get there Saturday, so he pushed it back a day.
So
there's a lot of like moving schedule stuff that's you wouldn't expect, but had I had like 200 people,
and it takes space, right? Because if you're doing packages. The guy that we bought packages from, he would just arrange the morning for pickup. He shows up in a parking lot, and he's got volunteers that help him, or maybe they're not volunteers. Maybe he pays them. I don't know. And so form a sort of a line of cars, and you tell him he checks your name off a list because he's selling several hundred customers, and so then he's pulling them directly out of his trailer. And putting them into your vehicle and you drive off. So like the logistics of having to handle the packages 3 and 4 times isn't there, where we brought them back and you had laid out pallets in the yard and we put 4 Nucs to a pallet in the standard X pattern.
Yeah, which is an entrance into every point into every corner. Yeah. It helps minimize what's called drift. So bees will leave and they come back and...
But then that means you have to have floor space, yard space to spread out 50 or 100 or 200 hives. Now,
yeah, thanks, Mom and Dad.
The guy we picked up from, he was much like the first example I gave, where we got there early before he told all of his customers to show up, so we had time to get our 50 up out of the way. But he was still had his loaded in the truck, and I think he was just going to sell them off the back of the truck to his customers that drove up that day.
I think so.
So there's a lot of, again, logistics there with something like this is a significant challenge that you need to keep in mind. So
yeah, and something else to keep in mind. A lot of people were really surprised that I insisted that they go through the hives with me. Most of them did not. Not most of them. I'd say half of them were not interested in going through the hives with me, and I insisted so that I could say, these are your bees. Here's the brood. If I could find the queen, I found the queen. I only had to mark one queen. One person wanted the queen marked, so I marked one queen. Not that big of a deal, and I was surprised because when I go and look at my bees, I require the queen has to be alive. And I have to go look at them. So we didn't look at the ones that we picked up. Interestingly, I thought about going through each of those hives and looking at them, and we didn't look at them. But that's because I have a good enough relationship with the guy that we purchased them from that I trusted him that these will be fine.
We also then you were looking for a couple of replacement queens here and there, and so you called up the guy that we had gotten the Nucs from. Was like, hey, you got queens? He's like, I got just a few more from the guy that was supplying queens, because it turns out all the other commercial beekeepers out there. If you had a couple episodes ago, we were talking about the losses in the commercial industries. Yeah, well, all those guys who got their hives back, they split everything down and then bought up all the queens that were available. So we got on the tail end of an order, and we picked up some more queens. They overnighted them, and then we were out there making splits, and so
all of them survived. That was really
you were like,
pretty cool.
Hey, you want some queens? I'm like, yeah, I'll take a queen or two, and then you were like, okay, they'll be here tomorrow, and I'm like, wasn't planning on splitting already.
Well, you weren't the only one. There was a bunch of people. That are. I still have. I probably have 10 queens upstairs still.
Oh, still?
Yeah. And so I made fondant for the...
Oh, and put it in the box for the workers?
So I had to make fondant for the workers to eat so that they keep feeding. And I sprinkled a little bit of pollen powder in there so that they consume that too, because that's but those workers are starting to get old enough that they're going to age out of feeding the queens. So people need to get on it.
So also made some splits around the yard. I dug through a couple of my hives and pulled some frames. Pulled out. Started going through. We talk about how you're supposed to spend those cold, early spring, late winter days prepping your equipment, getting it ready. I know why you're laughing, because while we talked about doing that, did you do that?
I did some of it. Yes.
And what I was doing.
Some of it I did not do.
The day before I was trying to make splits was
prepping some equipment,
digging through my pile of equipment. Now, guys, I've been beekeeping since 2008, and it turns out that's like 18 years now. That we're 25.
Yeah.
And I had gotten equipment when I first started from an older beekeeper, and it was used then. Oof. So it predates me. So some of my OG equipment, I was looking at it, and I'm like, especially my supers. The second year, I bought my deeps the first year, but then I didn't buy any mediums, supers. And between my first year and second year, I knew I was going to have a honey crop, so I needed, but I didn't have the money. So I didn't want to buy brand new equipment, and so I found an old guy, and he sold me some of his old. So for years and years and years, my go-to honey supers were brand new frames of mine with new foundation, but old boxes, and they've gotten to the point now where they're awfully rotten. They were not holding up real well. So this 2025 is the year that we're culling quite a bit of equipment. I've had a bout or two of EFB throughout the years, and I'm tired of trying to fight that. So a lot of my older stuff that's still around, I'm just, listen, it can go to the burn pile, and we've got fundage, between honey sales. I haven't really invested back into the apiary for the last couple of years. Just I haven't needed to. And but honey sales, I make about 150 pounds a year, and I only consume about 6 pounds myself. 6 or 8 pounds myself. So I end up selling quite a bit.
Yeah. And
it's time to reinvest. And so I was doing that, calling a bunch of equipment, and then that's what I made splits and dug up some brand new foundation from the barn attic and frames, plastic frames, and put that in. So we're working on that this week. We also had our big activity that we started out talking about was our first cutout of the year.
Yeah.
In an old, I would say, turn of the century, 1890s.
Yeah.
Brick.
I don't have a good feel for that kind of stuff. But for those that don't know what a cutout is, bees don't always nicely live in places that we would like them to, right? They don't always go to a tree. They don't always go to our hives or our boxes that we hang and hope that they move into. Sometimes they move into people's houses or buildings or businesses.
Not sometimes, a lot of times.
Sometimes they do that, and then they have issues because people really don't need them in there or don't want them in there. I do know one older gentleman, German fellow, that really likes I think he's got 3 or 4 colonies in the wall of his garage. And I get called routinely out there to pick up a swarm of bees.
They can live there. They're not hurt nothing.
Exactly. However, the lady that called us it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. And then she got stung and had to go to the ER.
Oh, was she allergic?
Yeah.
I didn't get that part of the story.
She spent the night in the ER because she got stung 3 times and her throat started closing up.
So this is a second story, all brick house. So the masonry walls all the way up, second story. And this was a short room above a kitchen. The house is currently under remodel, so they had pulled the ceiling down in a previous remodel, and they had spray foamed the roof joists area for insulation. But I think that was prior to when the bees had moved in, because clearly the foam was there before the bees, and I think they had done that work and cleared that space out, and then focused on the rest of the house, and just didn't really worry about getting back to that room upstairs because it was a low priority. And in the meantime, probably last year sometime, maybe last spring, a hive moved in and started building in what is essentially the soffit, which is a portion of the roof that overhangs the side of the building. And so there was this good 14-inch space between the inside wall and then like 2 rows of brick, which is pretty common for a brick house. That's like 8 to 10 inches. And then like another 4 or 6 inches of overhang soffit on the outside. And the part you could see from inside was real evident, right? Because they had chewed through the foam, and you could see this sort of natural. It wasn't like all in straight rows, right? It was all natural, all curvy, all funky looking.
Comb, right?
Comb.
Yeah,
and
it's really, really pretty.
It was all white. It was all brand new, like all last season.
Yep.
And so we're like, oh, it's right there. It's short, right? Like
super small colony.
Yeah.
Not that many bees flying around.
You know, the ceiling's all been removed, right? You can see all the way up to the foam. We had permission to remove any of the foam we needed because they were going to go back and obviously finish remodel of the space. So that wasn't a problem. And access, you start looking at it, and invariably the first joist space off of the end of a house is typically never a full-size joist space. We have ended up working in these like 6 or 8 or 1 foot thick joist space where you're up over your head. Yeah. You can't get your shoulders in there, so you're always reaching up, you're elbow deep, your shoulder deep, trying to reach up into some tight cavity. And this was no different. So we started off super easy, and we had to be back running, and we're up on it. It's sort of an odd height. It wasn't. We work off I've got it's about 2 foot tall. Technically, it's for drywall work. Okay. It's a drywall.
I always wondered what that little. It's probably 6 feet long.
No, it's short. It's like 4 feet long.
Is it 4 feet? Okay.
It's 3 to 4 feet long.
It's not that long. It's perfect height for getting to a ceiling.
Yeah, it's a really wide bench, and it's the perfect height if you're in a standard 8-foot ceiling. But this was like a 7-foot ceiling. So if you stood on it, your head was like right up in the rafter, so like you couldn't see anything because your eyeball was like the middle of the roof rafter.
Yeah.
So and then you couldn't back up because there was a joist right behind your head. Yeah. So then you're either wanting to be below it and reach up, which was no problem, except that puts you at like a 1 foot off the floor, not 2 feet off the floor. Or as we started to get deeper and deeper into it, you couldn't no longer reach, and so then you wanted to be 2 feet off of the floor, but then if you're in the first joist space, you're wedged up against this wall doing this sort of like, Mission Impossible, like your hands are above your head, your chest is up against the wall, but you can't move away from it because your back of your head bumps into the joist behind you. So really awkward.
And the bees are not real happy that you're in there.
Oh yeah, we got stung. We got stung.
So I think the worst part was I had to reach in often. So you cut the comb away because it's attached to the ceiling.
Yeah.
And sometimes attached to the bricks below. Like they've completed the top and bottom, so it's a single connection. So you're cutting both of them away. When you reach in blind, because you don't have the...
So you can... What he's trying to say is you can vacuum the bees off the face you can see.
Yeah.
But if the comb was running... Like, if you're looking at the comb, you're looking at the face of the comb. There's the other side that's buried between it and the next comb over that you can't get to, right? You can't. There's no way to get the vac in there. So you just got to reach around and just, like, be slow and very meticulous.
Yeah.
Wiggle
the comb free.
Try to make sure you don't squeeze any girls, but invariably you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I got stung I think 13 times. And the one that actually hurt was the one that I didn't realize I got stung in the wrist. And we were cleaning up and we were done. And
we're kind of doing an inventory of, I got stung here and here. And Luke goes, I got this one here. And he rolls back his sleeve, and you can still see the stinger sitting there.
Still sitting in there.
And I'm like, oh, that one's going to be rough.
Yeah, so the swelling's gone down now. And we get stung regularly anyway, right? It's all the time. Today, I think I got stung another 4 or 5 times working in a different hive that didn't want me in there. And so yeah, I think we got 13. I think you were double digits too. I've considered billing
6 or 8,
billing based on the number of times you get stung. So hey, we didn't get stung. Great, then no added bill.
Just a setup charge.
Yeah, just the normal fee. But they were super happy. So they wrote me back. I put a video together. It's on our YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can look at the whole video, including what we do with the bees afterwards. We don't just send them to the grinder, right? We put up a hive for them and free housing, and we gave them a new queen because we couldn't find a queen. So queen's in there, bees are in there. I checked on them today. They seem pretty happy. The queen's not released yet. They'll probably take another 2 days to release her.
So one of the things I wanted to mention was, like, that all sounds like a physical challenge.
It is.
And it was.
It 100% is.
But we literally got what we thought was 3/4 of the way done, and we had removed everything we could see.
Yep.
And we're like, okay, so we're done. And so a trick we often will use is we'll take a cell phone and we'll stick a cell phone up where you can't get your eyeball because it's around a corner or something like that for looking down a stud cavity or something. You can't get your face in there. And you can take some video or just take some photos or something, or just use it in live view and just look at the screen. So it allows you to see around a corner.
Yeah, this one you had to take a picture because you couldn't see.
And so we shut off the bee vac because it kind of always hums in the background. And if you watch the video, you'll hear that. And you can hear this roar from the hive. And like it's not just a little buzz.
It's not the BVAC.
And it's not a little bit. Not like 3 or 4. It's a full on roar.
Actually, a lot like the intro to our show. Same kind of roar.
And I'm like, dude, there's a lot of bees there. Like we cannot just leave those down there. Yeah. And the problem was they had moved farther down the soffit. The hive, this wasn't just the bees. The actual hive extended farther down the soffit than what we could get to with the area that was exposed. And we talked about it. We're like, okay, well, you either got to go outside and try to do it from the outside, or
which I'm afraid of heights, and it's
2-story. Right?
It's 2-story. It's terrifying.
So they had a ladder there. There was a 40-foot extension ladder. We could have done it, but
still terrifying.
Or you have to understand the framing of the house and understand that, hey, there's essentially a drywall nailer that's up against the brick facade of the house, the inside of the brick, that gives because at this point the ceiling had come down where it was sloped, so you're just the ceiling drywall would be attached to the bottom of the roof rafters, and so there has to be a drywall nailer, right, something to catch the edge of the ceiling up against the brick wall, and it looks really structural, but it turned out it was only a piece of 1x4. Now it's old, so it was like full inch by like full 4-inch.
Yeah.
But we had to tear out a bunch more foam and then end up cutting that board out. Once we cut that board out, it exposed the little gap that was probably 6 inches wide, 4 inches wide, between the tops of the bricks as they stepped down with the slope of the roof and the area between that and the bottom of the roof sheathing. And turns out that's where 3/4 of the actual population of the bees were.
Yeah,
was in that space.
They'd run down there. So the other part of that. So Steve's got construction background. I don't have any construction background.
And that's the thing that sort of the point of the whole story is, not only is there a physical challenge with doing the cutout, you need to understand bees and the makeup of a hive. Because by the way, we didn't mention the fact that there was like an entire 5-gallon bucket of honey that we pulled out of it too. So you're dripping honey. You have to understand the honey's going to be on the top side, and where's the rest of the hive, right? We never cut out more than about 3 pieces of like brood comb, right, of comb that you would raise baby bees in. Like, there's got to be more hive.
And there was no. The thing is, in the hive, there was no eggs. No eggs. No closed comb, which is like right before it's the larva, pupa, and then they hatch, right? Or pupa, larva.
Larva, pupa,
and then they hatch. And the pupa stage, they're covered. It's closed cell. And each of the cells is closed. And we had none of those. And I went through it all. I found no eggs.
It's spring,
either.
right? So this is peak build time for hives to be building in spring, and so we're like, okay. And then you have to know some more than just basic like construction methods to understand what you can take apart and what areas you need to take apart and what can you take apart safely in order to get to these. And it can be a real challenge. And that's why, we got somebody to contact us just this past week, wanting to have a couple cut out, and they're like, oh no, you should be able to do it for free because you get all the stuff. And we're like,
yeah, you get bees and honey. And
the two of us were on that job for 4.5 hours. And if it had been any other time when it was 60 degrees out, we would have been sweating like pigs up there in that room.
I sweat already, and I sweat a ton already, and I still sweat in this job that we just did.
Yeah.
And it's the other stuff that we talked about, right? We talked about a bee vac. A bee vac is like, this one is a 5-gallon bucket with a frame, like a cage inside that the bees can hold on to. That has a modified vacuum portion to it that's rechargeable. So this is a step up, I think, from what we were using before, which was like a hive that Steve put together. Steve's a good word worker, and it works fine. It was good, but this is more portable. This has the ability.
It's more portable,
and it kills less bees. A lot of the other one was because we're using a big vac. We're squishing a lot of bees.
Well, just like the other one, you could adjust the vac amount on that one because there was a suction. A blow by port that you could open up to reduce the amount of suction on the hose, but we have had some challenges with that vac also.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The point is, it's a commercially available product that still costs several hundred dollars to purchase.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of specialized equipment and knowledge that goes into that.
And then there's the suits, and then there's the we still are working on our list of stuff that we have to bring. We're pretty good now. We've got it pretty much down, but we don't have anything written down.
Yeah.
And we need to have our written list.
And really, like, the difference between an inside job and an outside job can be significantly different, right? Yeah. Because the inside job, like I call it my second story and a 4-foot stepladder, and that's all we used on that job. But last fall, we were doing exterior cutouts in the soffit of an apartment complex, and we used 2 sections of scaffolding, 2 ladders, 2 scaffold planks, right? So, like, there's a whole, like, you get deep quick in the amount of hard, like hard equipment you need.
Yeah.
And
we've had somebody come with us before to do a cutout, and they left halfway through.
And, if you're in a nice enclosed, you're in a living room or a finished basement.
That was an enclosed area too, and it wasn't that bad.
No, but if you're in a nice, like, living room or dining room, like, you're talking about plastic wrap on the walls, plastic wrap on the floor to protect carpet.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to think about trying to confine the space with plastic wrap, and that's adds more setup and tear down time and cost.
Yeah. This is not... For all those beekeepers that are listening that are like, hey, this is something I'm going to do, don't. I mean, not.
if your area doesn't have somebody, like, and there's obvious need for services in that area, obviously, you're a beekeeper, you're not going to get a carpenter to do it. But at the same time, you probably want to field trip to somebody that's doing cutouts and do a couple of hands-on before to get an idea of how it's going to go before.
That's another good lesson learned is before you quote it, you have to go and look at it.
Yeah.
And even the ones I've gone and quoted ones that I was sure, right, the apartment complex one that we had to stand up on the that we had to get scaffold that was like 30 feet up, whatever it was. I don't remember how high it was, but the original look at that, I was like, oh, these are going to be maybe 10 feet up, maybe 12 feet up, but they were crawling. The entrance was like at 8 feet.
No, the entrance was probably 6 or 7 feet up on the siding.
And they were crawling the rest of the way to the top of the wall.
All the way to the top of the stud bay.
Which was... It was...
It was a story and a half. So,
Yeah.
like, the top of the stud bay was probably 12 feet off the ground. But the problem was the site sloped aggressively away from that corner of the building. And so by the time you could get anything set up, you lost like another 4 foot of elevation on the ground from the building in like 3 or 4 feet. So by the time you set up any scaffolding, we were way up.
It was uncomfortably high.
And the site access.
And I did mention I do not like heights.
The site access for that was down a hill and across a ravine ravine's a strong word, but
small ravine.
It was pitching and rolling. It wasn't like you're going to drive a lift down there and get it to work.
Yeah,
so
you're carrying everything down.
We were in our hives. I was in my hives for the first time really in force over the past 2 weeks.
Nice.
And let's see, I did 2 reversals because they were still ignoring the bottom box, and the top box was basically full, looking like they wanted to swarm.
Yeah.
And they still hadn't touched the bottom box. So I did 2 reversals. I added
reversal, you're just moving the bottom deep because you run double deeps.
Yep.
So bottom deep box, you pull the top off, you throw the bottom on the top, and you're done with it.
And when I did that for one, the bottom box was rotten.
Oh,
and so I mean, it was on the bottom, so I didn't really care because the entrance is the entrance.
Yeah.
But like, if I was going to move it to the top, then I was going to be missing like 3/4 of an inch of box on the front corner.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is time to retire this box. And so I end up going to the supply and pulling another box and then moving all the frames over. Again, another opportune time to swap out comb for doing a comb refresh for the new foundation.
Yeah, the master beekeeping class, they're actually talking about the amount of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides that are in your comb and like how often should you be swapping it out. I think in Illinois, I've heard 10% a year. However, I would expect that depending on where you live, like a lot of beekeeping, depending on where you live and what's around you, might need to be more, might need to be less.
Well, we were sort of doing some mental math on if you had access to a commercial beekeeper that was bringing their hives back from almonds and wanting to break those down and make money doing that, selling off frames of brood or splits or whatever. If you did that every year and you sold off half of the frames in those hives because they were built up from the month that they were out in California, then you're basically turning over all of your frames like every other year. So, in the commercial world, they're really turning over their frames quite quickly because they're selling that off to make additional money as a revenue source. Versus the hobbyists were like, oh no, I've invested in this like 4 years ago. I have to hang on to all this, and then it can really turn into bite you in terms of the overall health of your hive.
I was giggling at you too when you told me, you're like, oh, I'm just going to get rid of some stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's about time. Steve likes to hold on to things for a while.
Oh,
I can't say too much. I like to hold on to things too, and I was laughing when he texted me and told me. And I was laughing at it, and I reached down and I grabbed one of my old screened bottom boards
and fell apart.
Picked it up, and the back end snapped off in my hand. And ants were inside. We all know how much I like ants. Ants were inside, and I thought, oh my gosh! And they're the wood ants, and there's a giant queen wood ant, and all of her little tiny retinue is sitting there. And I didn't have the heart to squish her. I have her in a jar, and I posted on Reddit. I was like, hey, anybody want this? Because it's a queen. You can't find them very easy. I got no takers, so she's still sitting in my jar in the garage. But yeah,
so I had one I overwintered in a deep and a medium, and so I added a deep to that, and I moved the medium to the top. I added Honey Super to a third, so I kind of got a mix of stuff between reversals and adding honey supers already since our dandelions are full force here. So
Yeah, our dandelions are real pretty. The library, so I went and made some splits off the library. So I manage hives for people that don't have the ability or the time to manage hives for themselves. They pay me for my time. And
just like a pool guy.
Just like a pool guy.
Lawn service.
Yep. And except I give them their honey back. So anyway, the library has done a really good job of planting all of the walking paths in dandelions. So they've got these beautiful gold paths all around the library. The bees were not happy with me being in there. Something that lots of people don't understand is that bees have personalities just like us. And sometimes they don't, well, usually they don't like the rain. And
weather dependent.
They lit me up today. I think I got 4 or 5 stings in my hand before I actually stopped. I don't usually use a smoker unless I have to. And I actually went and got a smoker to smoke them down to help make that split. And use one of the queens that we ordered for the club that I ordered for everyone. But we ordered some queens to go with those Nucs, and that's what we're making our splits off of. So helps it not to have to produce a queen, right? Because we've talked about queen math in one of our old episodes, and then you basically have a month gap there where that queen's got to get up to speed. So using a queen, a pre-mated queen, is pretty nice. So I did that for
those weren't marked, and neither were the ones in the Nucs we bought, but I did find both of mine, and I did mark both of mine.
So they were not marked. I did not mark the one that's in the cage currently because those JZBC cages they don't snap apart and get so I'll mark her
once they're released. Yeah, I'll find her when she's released, and I'll mark her then.
And I mark
blues this year color.
It is blue. Yep.
Yeah.
And I mark them by hand now. I just grab them by the body and real gentle. If you're not sure what real gentle is, grab a bunch of your drones because they're super easy to handle. And then when you get good drones, grab a couple of workers and prepare to get stung because the workers will go out of their way to sting you.
Yeah, they'll curl that butt around and
But once you're comfortable doing that, you're good.
In the news, I came across an article. I think it was both the New York Times had an article, and I think it was also picked up over, was it the LA Times or San Francisco? I sent a link to you. Basically, the point was real big-time media had picked up on the story we had talked about at the beginning of the year concerning the losses the commercial guys have seen. So that news has finally made it to mainstream media talking about the losses. I think I've had at least 1 or 2 conversations from the non-beekeeping world of friends asking about, hey, I think I've seen, are we having more bee losses again this year? And I was like, yeah, it's being another problem again.
Yeah.
So
I had one interesting one there. They said, well, we had some bee losses, but we've had like more bees, right? So we should be good. And I was like, yeah, we've had, last year, we had the most bees we've had since 1996 because of backyard beekeepers. And then this year losses is, I think, the highest losses in recorded history since we've been tracking it closely. So that's a big issue. That's a big deal.
So we weren't just crying wolf earlier in our earlier podcast. This is something that's really going on. And as a side effect, I guess we're starting to see honey prices increase.
Yeah, and I think that there's for all the stuff I don't like with the tariffs, I also think that side effect of the tariffs and loss of bees colonies is causing an increase in honey prices.
Yep.
So I probably won't change my price. I charge $15 a pound. I probably won't change my price this year.
I think 15 is good for us, and I think it means that people will find that to be the people that always were looking at it like, oh, that's too expensive, I'll get grocery store stuff. And now if the grocery store stuff is now, $8 or $10, and they're like, well, I could get the farm fresh stuff for 15. It's only a 30% markup instead of a 50 or 100% markup. So I think staying at 15 is where I'll be, but I expect increased traffic. In fact, moving on to the questions portion of the cast here. We were setting up some nukes with one of the club members at the apiary, and I had two randoms stop and walk up and were like, "Hey, we've always seen your hives out here," because they're kind of noticeable from the highway. We're kind of next to a main drag section of the highway out there. And she's like, "Well, I seen your hives. I was always hoping to see somebody out here, but now I finally were able to catch you." And she wanted to get some honey because she had some allergies, and I think she had a son-in-law or a son that was interested in a grown son that was interested in getting into beekeeping. So I gave her a card, and but in terms of messaging for the number of people that are looking for honey sales. I know you put out a call to the club looking for any leftover summer honey because you have people contacting you wanting honey, and you're basically out this time of year. So.
Yeah, I've built the pipeline enough. That's something that took a couple of years to build. So I now have a regular pipeline of people that want honey, and I get pretty strong demand. And interestingly, I'll get pretty angry calls when I'm out.
Yeah.
And this time of year, I'm usually out. So we got about 16 pounds of cutout comb so far from the cutout that we did. It's been about 16 pounds. I actually had a class, quote unquote class. I had some friends that came over and they wanted a tour of the apiary, so we did a tour of the apiary. And as I was talking to them about bees, I'm like, "Hey, guess what? You get to crush comb." So we sat around for an hour, 5 people crushing comb.
Now, did you do it by hand, or did you give them a potato smasher?
Oh no, we did it. Everyone gloved up and did it by hand.
So you would think that that's a fun process until you've squeezed like your
they loved it
5th or 6th handful of honey, and then like you go through trying to get all the clumps, and then your hands start to cramp because you're not used to make squeezing a fist. Like you can make a fist, but there's difference between making a fist and like physically putting something in your fist to squish.
Yeah.
And having to use that grip strength to actually squish something, and then like
it wasn't bad with like 6 people.
3 or 4 minutes, you're like, "Oh, my hands are so tired."
It wasn't bad with that many people, and then I have a strainer specifically for cappings usually, so you let that sit for like a day.
Yeah,
it was pretty. There's a lot of crystallized honey in there that I was surprised at. So probably some dandelion honey, which crystallizes real easy because it's real light.
Well, I think it was mostly from last year.
Yeah, maybe some from last year. Because all honey crystallizes. If you guys don't know, all honey will crystallize eventually. You just have to reheat it. So right now it's being gently heated in one of my heaters upstairs.
Our last segment, wrapping up the show here, is where we talk about what we're going to be doing on for the next 2 weeks when our droning on. And it's going to be more of the same, being out in the yard every week. I've got an appointment already to stop by on Wednesday and check the stuff at the club, and I'll have to check my splits and see that they've released my queens I put in there.
Yep.
And
I checked a couple of mine. They had some of them. They had some of them. They haven't. The stronger splits that I made had.
Yeah.
The weaker ones are still covering her because it gets cool at night, but they haven't released them.
How many are you feeding? Are you feeding anybody with 1-to-1?
Not directly feeding. I'm open feeding some.
Yeah.
A lot of the really strong hives have stopped taking feed.
I put a feeder in one of my splits, but then I didn't make up any 1-to-1 feed, and I was sort of torn between this time of year because with all of the blooming stuff, that can be a hard sell unless we're going to have a period of bad weather, in which case they're not going to fly. We'll take it then. 2
bags of powdered sugar and half a cup of water, and you can make your own fondant, and they take that really well. Yeah, but you got to make sure that you're getting some protein in there too, because the baby bees are fed largely off of protein.
We've got also a grafting class coming up in May that we are going to be prepping for, trying to put together some more both our class materials and our physical materials, because if you end up attending that class, we had quite a bit of positive feedback from our last meeting. So it sounds like we might end up having to do a second round of that if the interest is as big as it sounded it is.
I'm hoping that we have to do 2, because I would really like to have.
Have we talked about we're charging for this theoretically?
We're charging for this. I would like to. I'm sitting down and look at the numbers, so I'd like to charge for our time.
Yeah,
but also make it reasonable so it's not a huge burden for everyone.
And we'll have some supplies, but typically,
I think normally what we paid when we did it years ago. So Steve and I went through the IQI. It was taught by Tom Pancone at the time. We got some supplies from it, and I think it cost us $50 for an afternoon.
And I think he had lunch in there too.
Did he have lunch in there too?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll probably put something like that together.
And low cost supplies for the JZBZ cells and things like that, I think will be, it's easy to get that in bulk and then split that up because, one person doesn't need like 500 cups when you're just wanting to graft, a half a dozen grafts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's easy to split that up and split up the cost. Although I assume most of that's probably already still sitting in a warehouse in the U.S. and doesn't actually have to come in from China with the new tariffs.
Yeah, there's not a lot of wait list on that, but it'll be interesting to see. We'll be probably using JZBZ equipment for it.
Yep.
And we'll have to get
grafting tools.
Yeah, and get some modified frames going somehow. That's my main concern. Frames are about $450 right now. Maybe $450 per frame.
It'd be easy to knock those out in the wood shop.
Yeah. Then we'll also be making oxalic acid strips. So I'll be following Randy Oliver's scientific beekeeping instructions on the sponge, the Swedish sponge oxalic acid glycol strip release. Getting those in the hives because I'm interested in seeing how that affects my hives and survival.
And then we'll probably be in May sometime before we're wanting to do our first batch of grafts with, I guess we'll piggyback that onto our grafting class to do our vaccinated queens.
Oh, yeah. That'll be, so the queens off of our grafting class I plan to vaccinate.
Yep.
We'll mate them first. Yep. I need to get 50 of them. That's the thing. That's a lot of, people are like, oh, 50, that's not that big of a number. That's a lot of queens. That's a lot of equipment to do a lot of queens.
Well, especially if you're going to be doing it in a grafting class, right? You have to consider, what are we going to consider for a take rate?
Yeah.
20%?
Maybe.
So you got to multiply that into how many actual grafts we're going to make. And then because we actually need like
50 mated.
No, yeah, mated, which means mated. We need like 60 or 70 like cells that actually hatch. Yeah. And then mating nukes for all of those. Yeah. So we'll have some more logistics for trying, because currently your Queen Castle's number 12?
Yeah, probably. Well, 12 when they're empty.
They're not empty right now?
Somebody's made some splits and put them in the Queen Castles.
Oh, sir. That's not what those are for. I think you have a whole bunch of brand new Pro Nukes.
I do have a bunch of brand new Pro Nukes I could probably use. I was thinking about getting some Palmer Nukes and putting them on some pallets.
Do we need to fire up the old table saw and make some 5-frame plywood nukes again?
Probably. But, man, those Palmer Nukes are really nice and they survive really well.
I mean, it's the same. Are you going to buy the commercial ones?
Yeah, just buy some commercial ones that are done. Like time or money. Right now, this time of year, I've got no time. I got money. Some money. Not very much money beekeeping.
Or we could put together an event.
And
we could do an event.
Woodworking event.
A nuke making event. We did it
we did it before.
What, 3 years before COVID?
Yeah, it was all day.
And
I remember being sore.
It It was a good 4 hours in the afternoon.
Yeah, but that was not a. Oh, it was a nuke making. I was going to say
Yeah.
that was a.
The idea was that you could bring woodenware that you wanted to assemble if you had never assembled woodenware, and we would kind of run you through assembling your woodenware. And then one of the members at the time was like, "Hey, I'm going to bring a couple sheets of 1/2-inch plywood. You think we could cut out some of these 5-frame nukes?" And I'm like, "I got a table saw. We can knock them out."
Yeah.
The old way was, you had an old panel saw or something to break down sheets, but now they have the track saws. And I have since acquired a DeWalt track saw, which will make breaking down plywood out in the driveway super easy, super quick, because you don't have to wrestle the giant panels across the cabinet saw.
Yeah. Do we do nukes or do we do more Palmer nukes? Nah, that's.
You mean Palmer nukes or more mating castles?
Well, the mating castles are really good too. The gaps in our mating castles is rough. I had to go back through and seal some gaps. Yeah, we had some lips that we didn't. We ran out of gas towards the end of that process.
I thought we were doing pretty good on all of our tolerances.
We did okay, but we missed the lips. So the inside of the box has a lip, and we missed that lip. And the last year, anytime you open the lid, the girls were sitting facing each other like, "Hey, this is mine. You can't. Don't come in here. You don't come in here." So they were fighting, not really fighting, just a standoff. So I have a little piece of wood that I can cut off and knock into there as for notches, but not that big of a deal.
I thought our center boards were rabbited deep enough to cover the lip that
it was
the frames were.
It's not. But this year I have one on each side, so there's an empty space in between, so they don't really care.
Yeah.
There's enough of a gap there, and
either way, we could knock those out in an afternoon.
Yeah, just have to pull some of my old equipment. I've got plenty of equipment,
and I've got equipment sitting around that we could dedicate to some queen castles.
Yeah, but queen castles are an important part of this whole queen rearing business.
It is when you're wanting to do more than 2 or 3, and you've got just a couple of extra frames, a couple extra pro nukes or something sitting around.
Yeah.
But you're trying to do 50 or 60 queens all the time because you've also decided that you're going to do vaccinated queens. Then the logistics. It seems like we're ending on this logistics thing again. It's almost like It's almost like the sideliner beekeeping is is much more of a step than the hobbyist than what you. I'll just be some big. It'll be 50 to 100 hives. It'll be no big deal.
Yeah. Well, it all depends on what you're doing, right? What your goal is, and we're as far as sideliners go. I think we are. I'm pushing the envelope more than I need to, right? I could just focus on honey, and I could just focus on classes, and I don't have to do any of the outreach for raising queens and all this other stuff that we're doing. We don't have to do that, but I want to do that because I think that's a better part. I think that's a fully realized portion of beekeeping, right? To do the whole thing is actual beekeeping rather than just doing a part of the whole process. And realistically, it's probably not the best business decision, if we're being totally honest. However,
I mean, you mean training people to make their own queens and make their own splits would be counterproductive to selling them $200 nukes every year?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
well, and not only that, it's like, is it a good use of my time fiscally? And probably the answer is no. But I don't really care. At that point, I'm like, no, I still want to do it because no one else does these things, right? That's the other part of this. We talk about all the stuff that Steve and I are doing. Who else locally has queen rearing courses?
In our area, that need is definitely lacking. Yeah. But I know for a fact there are other clubs that take that on
absolutely
as a club activity and spread that load across multiple volunteers.
Right.
And they're able to successfully maintain a good educational opportunity for area beekeepers. But, it's the whole village to raise a kid thing as opposed to, a couple guys sitting in the basement trying to sort it all out.
Yeah, but the other part is that I'm particular on how I want things done, and doing them right is important to me, and so I think we do a good job of doing it right.
And it also puts into perspective why other people along the way did it and then gave up on it, because
it's a lot of work.
The amount of work involved and stuff like that. So
yep.
I think that wraps it up for this episode of Beekeeping Buddies. We appreciate you listening, and we hope you tune in for next episode where we'll be talking about all the things around the bee yard. Thanks for listening.